Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. At UFC 279, Khamzat Chimaev defeated Kevin Holland with a first-round Darce choke, and he made it look so easy. And Khamzat Chimaev, I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding, all the events that took place before UFC 279, but there is a lot of hype around Khamzat Chimaev, and a lot of people are wondering what's next for Khamzat Chimaev, especially considering a lot of people expected him to fight for the welterweight title soon. But now you had the weight miss, and he was supposed to fight Nate Diaz, and this was supposed to be like a busy fight for him. And now he misses weight. He ends up fighting Kevin Holland at a catch weight. So he's kind of in a weird set of circumstances right now. What's his future? Is it going to be at the welterweight division? Is it going to be in the middleweight division? I'm going to answer that question. I have 3 matchups for Khamzat Chimaev. And these aren't necessarily the matchups I want to see, even though I want to see all these matchups. These are the matchups that I think are most likely for the UFC to make next. And I'm going to go from 3 to 1, 1 being the fight that I think the UFC is most likely to make next for Khamzat Chimaev. So first off, before I even get into that, I have an entire full post-fight for UFC 279 where I talk about Khamzat Chimaev versus Kevin Holland in detail. I will link it down in the description. But what a performance by Khamzat Chimaev. I get it. He missed weight. He was supposed to fight Diaz. He ends up fighting Holland. Holland's not a great grappler. But what he did to Kevin Holland was unbelievable. It was so dominant. It was so quick. Kevin Holland, even though he's always had his issues with the takedown defense, and my official prediction for this fight was first round submission within the first, I think, 3.5 minutes of the first round. But Chimaev went out there in roughly 2 minutes, took Kevin Holland down, and Kevin Holland's been working on his grappling for, 2 years now, ever since it got exposed in the Brunson fight. He had some good scrambles. Khamzat just started ragdolling him repeatedly to the ground. He gets the Darce choke. Kevin Holland's kind of fighting it off. Khamzat Chimaev repeatedly adjusts his position and eventually locks in the Darce choke and taps Kevin Holland out. What a great performance. And for me, I get it doesn't mean all that much because Kevin Holland's not even ranked in the welterweight division. Kevin Holland's had his issues, with grappling defense in the past, and also it was short notice for Kevin Holland. He was supposed to fight Daniel Rodriguez, which was a fight that was made on 2 weeks' notice, and then now he's fighting Khamzat Chimaev on 24 hours' notice. But to put on a dominant performance like that was very, very impressive. I don't feel like I learned a lot about Khamzat, just because we've already seen him against Li Jingliang as well as Gilbert Burns. But still, it was super impressive, and I cannot wait to see who Khamzat Chimaev fights next. So the first matchup I have, number 3 on the list, I have Khamzat Chimaev versus Paulo Costa. I mean, they got into the little bit of the, scuffle during the fight week for UFC 279 at the UFC Apex. And Khamzat Chimaev has been known to move up to middleweight. He fought Gerald Meerschaert at middleweight. He's been at middleweight multiple times. He is a huge welterweight. And the reason also I suggest this fight, Khamzat Chimaev missed weight for his fight with Nate Diaz. That's the exact reason why the fight didn't happen, because he was 7.5 pounds overweight. So the future's kind of weird. Is he going to fight at welterweight? Did he have an injury going into this fight? That's my, thoughts on it. I think he had an injury going into this fight. He didn't want to pull out. He thought he would make weight, and then he ended up not being able to make weight. So his next fight may very well be at middleweight. And what a better fight than Paulo Costa. They have the backstory now. Paulo Costa is ranked, I believe, number 6 in the middleweight division currently. Stylistically, that's a fun fight. Paulo Costa is a massive middleweight. I mean, this guy looks like he should be fighting at light heavyweight. And it would be very interesting. And I know Costa didn't look particularly good against Luke Rockhold, who had been out for many years, but he's coming off a win. There's not a lot of guys available to challenge for the belt in the near future against Israel Adesanya, depending on what happens in Adesanya versus Pereira at UFC 281. So if Khamzat goes up to middleweight, fights Paulo Costa, keep in mind, Khamzat came out of this fight with no damage. So he could fight, relatively quickly. He came out completely unscathed against Kevin Holland, didn't absorb a single strike. If he fights Paulo Costa maybe by the end of the year, December, November, and he beats Paulo Costa, who's ranked number 6, there's no doubt in my mind he's next in line for a middleweight title shot. He's already ranked, I believe, number 3 in the welterweight division. He's a superstar. I think he can headline any pay-per-view at this point. The UFC could book this fight. He goes out there, he beats Paulo Costa, he fights Israel Adesanya or Alex Pereira, depending on what happens in that fight. Because if Adesanya loses, depending on how he loses, there's probably going to be a rematch just because Adesanya has been the champ for a while. But Khamzat versus Paulo Costa, I mean, the build-up would be a lot of fun. They're both elite-level fighters, and it could be a number one contender fight because Paulo Costa has the history with Adesanya. He lost once, but granted the depth of the division, Paulo Costa could fight for the title again in the middleweight division against Adesanya just because he's only lost once versus, Vettori and Whitaker have already lost twice. So I think that fight would be a lot of fun. I don't think it's super likely. I just think Paulo Costa is a risky fight for Khamzat Chimaev, and that would be Paulo Costa's last fight on his deal. So I don't think the UFC makes that fight. Moving on to number 2 on the list, and this is the fight that most people thought would happen after Khamzat Chimaev was to defeat Nate Diaz, because there's no doubt in anyone's mind that Khamzat Chimaev was going to go out there and defeat Nate Diaz and brutalize him. And the next fight was supposed to be Khamzat Chimaev for the title. Obviously, the division got shooken up at UFC 278. So the next fight I am talking about is Khamzat Chimaev versus the winner of Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards 3. Usman lost the belt to Leon Edwards. He got head kick KO'd in the 5th round. There's going to be a trilogy in February, March, or April of 2023. Khamzat Chimaev, the thought was Khamzat would beat Diaz, Usman would beat Edwards, and then Usman would be defending his welterweight title against Chimaev in early 2023. That's what kind of makes this a little bit unlikely, because now if they want Khamzat to fight for the title, he's going to have to wait for Edwards-Usman 3, which isn't going to take place till March or April. So this keeps Khamzat Chimaev out till maybe fall of 2023, which I don't necessarily want to see him sit out that long. But we've seen worse. We've seen guys sit out for longer for title shots in the past. So I think it's really possible. Also, he could be a late notice replacement for that fight as well. Maybe they book him a fight on that card against somebody, very winnable fight, and he can serve as a late notice replacement. But I don't think Usman or Edwards are going to take Chimaev on short notice, to be honest. So I don't even know if they do that. But Khamzat could sit around and wait around and fight the winner of that fight. Maybe it happens in February. So then maybe Khamzat could fight for the title against Edwards or Usman, whoever wins that fight. Maybe summer of next year at the absolute earliest. But that is a fight a lot of people are dying to see. But what also throws a wrench into that plans is Khamzat Chimaev missing weight. Now people are wondering, can he make weight at 170? Because we don't really have a solid excuse. He keeps saying the doctor stopped me, early in the morning. But he had to be having some serious issues that somebody called the doctor to begin with. So that's not really an excuse. So I don't know if the UFC is going to want to have him wait a year. A lot of people want to see him fight. In the past, he's shown that he wants to be active and then have the chance of him missing weight again because he is a massive welterweight. But who wouldn't love Khamzat Chimaev versus Kamaru Usman or Khamzat Chimaev versus Leon Edwards? The Chimaev-Usman fight is a fight that I've dreamt of since the Li Jingliang fight against Chimaev. And then after he beat Gilbert Burns, I wanted to see it even more because Khamzat is an elite level grappler. He has great jiu-jitsu, great grappling, great wrestling. And I wonder, because I've always said this about Kamaru Usman, anyone who can keep it standing with Kamaru Usman and not be worried about the takedown has a chance to beat Kamaru Usman. And I do not think Chimaev is going to be worried about the takedown of Kamaru Usman. So that fight would be a lot of fun. As far as the Leon Edwards-Chimaev fight, that's a fight that's been booked 3 times over. That was booked in late 2020, early 2021, and then March of 2021. And all 3 times it fell apart. And if Leon Edwards can keep his belt, in the trilogy against Kamaru Usman, who wouldn't want to see that fight? And what a backstory that would be. That the fact that Leon took the fight against Khamzat in December of 2020 when Khamzat Chimaev was unranked but had a lot of hype behind him. And then the fact that a couple years later, 2-3 years later, depending on the time frame of when it would happen, you would have Leon Edwards defending the welterweight title against Khamzat Chimaev. That would be a great story. And if Leon Edwards beats Usman again, the hype around Leon Edwards is going to be even better because if he does, I would assume he would do a better job in the trilogy than he did in the rematch because, he lost the majority of the rematch and then head kick KO'd Usman, in the 5th round. So if he can go out there, show some good takedown defense, he showed some good scrambles in the rematch, was able to get up. If he can go out there in the trilogy and show the ability to stuff some of Usman's takedowns, the match against Chimaev would be massive. And they could do that in the UK again, because supposedly Edwards versus Usman is going to be in the UK. Chimaev is, training out of Sweden. They could do Edwards versus Chimaev. That would be a massive welterweight title fight, and sign me up for that. And stylistically, it would be so much fun. But I just think there's too many factors, and it's probably not going to happen. I think there's a good chance it could. Maybe like a 40%, 30% chance he could just wait it out. But I just think because of the weight miss, because of the time frame, I just don't think it's going to happen. I think Chimaev will most likely fight again in 2022. He came out unscathed against Holland. He's so popular right now, or hate it. People want to see Khamzat Chimaev fight. So I think the most likely fight for Khamzat Chimaev, number one on the list, is Khamzat Chimaev versus Colby Covington. And I have been dying to see this fight since UFC 273, where Khamzat Chimaev was able to defeat Gilbert Burns. And Colby Covington has been radio silent on Khamzat. And I really don't think Colby Covington wants this fight at all. But, Dana White said Colby Covington's looking to fight. Who's he going to fight? Everyone else is kind of booked up right now. He beat Jorge Masvidal. That's the first win he's had against someone who's currently in the top 10 of the welterweight division in years. His claim to the top of the division is 2 losses to Kamaru Usman. But Colby Covington, he's pretty popular himself, hate it, liked, whatever you want to say. People want to watch Colby fight, and he's an elite level fighter. And the Chimaev versus Covington fight is just so perfect. Can you imagine the build up to that fight? And the second fight against Usman for Covington was very close. Some people even think Covington won that fight. And I truly believe if Covington can go out there and beat Khamzat Chimaev, even if Usman is able to get his belt back from Leon Edwards, I would have no problem with the UFC booking Usman versus Covington 3. Even though Covington's lost 2 fights and got stopped in the first one, I would have no problem with that just because of how close the second fight was. And if he went out there and derailed the train that is Khamzat Chimaev, the number 3 ranked welterweight in the world, it's hard to deny Covington another title shot. And maybe Edwards keeps the belt. So then you have a fresh matchup between Edwards and Covington now. So I think Covington should take the fight, knowing it's a number 1 contender fight. I don't think he wants to fight. And I know a lot of people are saying, he has the lawsuit against Jorge Masvidal. This stuff could go on for literal years. So what, is Covington retired then? No one from the Covington camp has ever said Covington can't fight because of the sucker punch from Jorge Masvidal. So that is a myth until we hear otherwise. Until it's confirmed by his manager or somebody else, that is a myth. This lawsuit could go on for 5 years for all we know. Is Covington just going to retire? He's already getting up there in age. He's in his mid-30s. He's not going to be around for another 5 years. So it's now or never. If he goes out there, beats Chimaev, he gets another title shot against Usman or Edwards. And if Chimaev beats Colby Covington and he shows he can make the 170-pound weight limit, there's no denying Khamzat Chimaev deserves a title shot. And imagine the hype if Khamzat Chimaev goes out there and starches Colby Covington. Imagine the hype that would go into an Edwards or Usman welterweight title fight. It would be amazing. And honestly, Khamzat Chimaev versus Colby Covington is, in my mind, the only fight to make right now. It's really the only fight to make. I would love the build-up. I love the stylistic matchup because you have Chimaev, who's this elite-level wrestler. You have Colby Covington, who is an elite-level wrestler as well. Both guys stand-up could use some work. I give the favor in the stand-up to Khamzat Chimaev. And the power advantage to Khamzat Chimaev. Colby has pillow punches. But, if Colby Covington, with his wrestling defense, is able to weather the early storm against Khamzat Chimaev, Colby Covington has unlimited cardio. So I would be very interested to see if we get to that 3rd, 4th, or 5th round. And if that fight happens, it has to be 5 rounds. I will riot if they make Chimaev versus Covington and it's not 5 rounds. I'd be very interested to see how Chimaev's gas tank would hold up to the volume and cardio of Colby Covington. And that could headline a pay-per-view. I would have no problem with that headlining a pay-per-view. I criticized UFC 279. I said we should have got from the start Khamzat Chimaev versus Colby Covington, co-main, Ferguson versus Nate Diaz. That would have been a perfect card. So I hope they make this fight. I don't think it's going to headline a pay-per-view unless it headlines UFC 282. Because we've heard rumors of Yuri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira too. We've heard rumors of John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. at UFC 282 in December. Neither of those have been announced. So let's say for some reason the UFC can't come to terms and make those fights. Book Khamzat Chimaev versus Colby Covington. Main event, UFC 282. Title shot on the line. And then the winner of that fight can wait till the summer or fall of 2023 and fight the winner of Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 3, whoever holds the welterweight title. I absolutely love this Chimaev-Covington fight. I really hope the UFC makes it. And I just think it makes too much sense for the UFC not to make it. It's just a matter of whether or not Covington takes the fight. I just don't know who else he's going to fight. Everyone else seems like they have, their matchups in hand. It looks like Gilbert's going to fight Masvidal, so the only other matchup would maybe be Covington versus Gilbert, but I don't think that's going to happen. So let me know what you guys think about all these potential fights. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.